So this is the end for poker. It's over. Poker players, you fought valiantly through numerous existential crises, but this is just too much. At least that's the word on the street right now with the passing of the Trump tax bill, which effectively threatens the entire gambling industry. In the past week, I've received numerous frantic texts, I've seen YouTube videos like this Doug Polk video, and I've been told that professional poker players need to start looking for a new line of work. But is this really true? So in this video, I'm going to break down what the Trump tax bill actually means for poker players. I'm going to focus entirely on the poker component of the bill, as the rest of the 1,000 pages is beyond the scope of this channel. Note that this is a very fluid situation, and it's possible that by the time you watch this video, a number of things have changed. But with that said, if you force me to bet at this moment, I would bet on this being a mere annoyance, not an apocalypse, and it's possible it has no impact at all. But first, what is the hype even about? So the Trump tax bill says that poker players can only deduct 90% of their losses. This overturns a provision that's been in place by the Internal Revenue Code for over half a century that allowed poker players to deduct all of their losses. The new provision wasn't even in the original version that was voted on by the House, but this crappy policy was put in, by all people, by a senator with the last name Crapo from Idaho. And this is what you get when you vote on 1,000 pages of issues all at once with a single yes or no vote. Of course, you're not considering nuance, you're not going one by one with all the additional issues, and it's basically chaos in, chaos out. But that's besides the point. What does this actually mean for poker players? The way poker players report taxes is they sum up all their winning days and they sum up all their losing days. And naturally, they have both types throughout the course of the year. And they wind up being able to deduct their losses from their wins and effectively pay tax on the profit that they've made over the course of the year. It's pretty logical. Well, now the issue is, because they're only able to deduct 90%, they're effectively paying tax on phantom income that they didn't actually earn. And so the way this impacts players is going to vary by what type of player you are. The problem becomes bigger and bigger as your losses get bigger. So let's look at 4 different common poker player types and how the tax bill is likely to impact them. Let's start with the recreational poker player that expects to lose money for the year. These guys are not affected by this at all because they don't have profits to report. It's possible that once in a while they have a big score and they end up having a surprising winning year, but on average, no profits to report. This won't have an impact. You guys can just go on, keep having fun playing poker. Don't worry about this. You probably didn't click on this video anyways. Let's move on to the amateur small winning poker player. So let's say a player wins, or their wins sum up to $120,000 over the course of the year, but their losses sum up to $70,000. So in the past, what would happen is they would pay tax on $50K of profit. Well, this would no longer be happening under the new bill. They wouldn't be able to deduct the full $70K. Instead, they'd only be able to deduct 90% of that, or $63K. So on net, they'd pay taxes off of 120 minus 63K, or 57K of tax. And so basically their tax bill would go up, we'd imagine, from 50 to 57K now they're paying taxes. It probably would increase their tax bill by around 2,000 or so, depending on their tax bracket. Not the end of the world, but certainly an undesirable outcome. Let's move on up the scale to professional winning poker players, more commonly like the cash game grinders, and say their wins come out to like $300,000 over the course of the year, but their losing days sum up to $150,000. So again, normally they would pay tax on 150K of profit, but instead here they're only able to deduct the 90% of the 150K in losses, so that leaves 135K they can deduct. It winds up being 165K they're paying tax on instead of 150, probably increases their tax bill by around 4K or so. Okay, and you can see the problem just keeps increasing and increasing as your losses get bigger, and it becomes really obvious when you start talking about the big name tournament professionals, the guys playing really high stakes. These guys really get hurt because of their large sum of losses. And let's take an example, which would be Daniel Negreanu, and we can look at his 2024 poker stats. So in 2024, Daniel Negreanu lost $86,000 playing poker tournaments. His wins actually summed to around 2.792 million, but his losses exceeded that and summed to more like 2.87 million. So he lost that amount of money. So, it kind of sucks, but okay, it's a losing year. You pay your dues. But now, if this year were to happen under the Trump tax bill, he would not only lose the 86K naturally, he would also actually have a tax bill to pay as though he had a winning year. So look at how this works out. If the 2.874 million in buy-ins can only be deducted up to 90%, he's only deducting 2.58 million. Okay, and so that's less than his payouts. He winds up having a tax bill of $205,000 in a year where he already lost 86K. This is just like adding insult to injury, salt in the wound, absolutely crushing to someone like this. And I don't know if it would cause Daniel to stop playing poker, but certainly there will be some players, some big name people that just decide that this, high volume, low margin game of tournament poker is not worth playing. And if the game starts losing mega stars like that, it's an issue. It could flow downstream and affect the popularity of the game. Perhaps some poker players will not want to make the climb to the upper levels because it's just not worth it. The incentive structure isn't there, and they're being unfairly penalized by paying this phantom income. So members of the poker community can probably see that this is kind of ridiculous. Poker players should be paying tax based on their profits, not this phantom income level, and it certainly would suck to lose some megastars like this. But here's the thing. The vast majority of people in the poker industry are not in this situation. They're in one of the three camps that I mentioned earlier. Either they're a recreational player, they're losing money, they're a small winning player, or they're a professional but without nearly the losses that somebody like Negreanu is sustaining over the course of a year. So I'm going to leave you with 3 reasons for optimism about why I do not think this bill will actually have that much of an effect on the industry and poker will continue to thrive. So an industry just won't be destroyed if the vast majority of people are actually unaffected or only slightly affected by the bill. Okay, so we touched on the recreational players basically aren't being affected. The small winning players and the professional players that are playing normal mid-stakes poker are losing a few $1,000s per year to this. It's more of an annoyance than an apocalypse for most of them. And the most likely thing is that people aren't going to actually stop playing poker because of this. They'll grit their teeth, they'll roll their eyes, but they'll keep on playing, and it's not going to actually make a huge dent in the industry. We will lose some fringe cases of the megastars if this were to remain in place, which would be unfortunate, but I do think the majority of poker players would continue playing. The second effect this legislation could have is actually an unintended one and an unexpected one, is it could lead to softer games. If you think about the way this could play out, amateur players weren't thinking about taxes anyways. They were already kind of ready to just play the game and have fun and enjoy themselves, so this isn't really affecting them. They're going to continue to show up. The people that are crushing the games, they're going to continue playing. The guys that are really getting hit are the people that a swing like this of a few $1,000s per year could make or break and could tip them from being a small winning player to now a losing player, and now it's no longer worth the pursuit. And so if you eliminate a lot of small winning players, grinder types, people that are playing well but just can't withstand this extra expense, it actually does make the game softer. Now, this isn't a desired impact. We want to be growing the industry and have as many people playing as possible, and so hopefully the legislation does get overturned, but it is worth noting that the legislation could have this unintended effect. So the number one reason for optimism is that this legislation could, of course, just be overturned, and already there are efforts to do so. Dina Titus, a Nevada senator, recently proposed on Monday the Fair Bet Act, which would restore the amount you can deduct back up to 100%. And when we look at why this bill was put in place in the first place, we can see that maybe there is a good chance of reversing it because it was not some sort of ideological attack on gambling. It was just a mere budget reconciliation exercise. Effectively, they were trying to find $1 billion to offset some of the other Trump tax cuts, and they figured, well, let's pull from the gambling community. They won't notice, they won't put up much of a fight. It's turning out to not be that way, And in effect, $1 billion in government money is very, very little, as we know. And it's unlikely that this bill would even have that effect of raising $1 billion in tax revenue if less people are gambling and there's less people playing poker in general. So the bill barely moves the needle. It may not even have the intended effect, and it wasn't fueled by any sort of like real ideological agenda to begin with. All of these things make it more likely that the bill will get overturned, and hopefully the Fair Bet Act passes. It has until the end of the year to do so. However you view the Trump tax bill, I think it's clear there's still a decent amount of uncertainty, and there are a lot of reasons for optimism. So anybody who thinks that this is like the death of the industry, this is all doom and gloom, I just think that's an overreaction and a totally bad read. So given that we think poker is going to continue thriving despite all this nonsense, why not join the PTO Poker monthly membership, sharpen your skills, and join our community? We have a great mix of private coaching, digital content, and a group community that I know you will love. You can also trial the membership for free for an entire week and make sure that you enjoy content that will be very, very different from the content in this video. It'll be much more focused on strategy, mental game, and performance coaching. But nevertheless, I think you'll love the content if you like some of my other videos. Thank you for watching, and let's hope the poker community gets some much better news real soon and we get this overturned.